What should we do with these episodes? Spock's brain, the Cloud Minders. Spock's brain, the Cloud Minders. Oh, I have a great idea.
Strange New Worlds episode review. Well, my friends, enemies, and all you neutral territories out there, we have finally crossed that imaginary line in the sand which bifurcates Star Trek Strange New Worlds Season 1 into two halves. That's right, we are officially in the back half, Season 1, Episode 6. This one's called Lift Us Where Suffering Cannot Reach. And before I get into the episode proper, just a couple housekeeping tips. One, I am going to be giving a brief rundown of the episode, and let's face it, it's probably not going to be that brief. So if you don't want spoilers, either come back after you've seen it or skip to the end. Two, I have adjusted the way I'm going to show my reference slides of images from the episode, so give me your thoughts in the comments below whether or not you like it, hate it, couldn't give a crap either way, so that I know I'm doing something either right or wrong on my end. Otherwise, let's get into this episode. So as I said, episode 6, taking place on Stardate 1943.7, and it's in the Magellan system. So we start off with a great shot of our fearless captain, Pike himself, in the turbo lift. Oh, that's not Pike, is it? I can't tell. I defy any one of you, though, to give me at least one difference between this picture and this picture. I can't do it. Can any of you tell me a difference between these two? Because I am not seeing it. But as I said, back to the episode. We start off in the Magellan system. This is a place where Pike himself had encountered a problem about 10 years ago. He had to rescue a shuttle. He was not captain at that point, obviously. He was only a lieutenant, I believe. So he's hoping that this return will not lead to any disaster and it will just be a simple cartographic mission of the area. Since this is an episode of Star Trek, we're pretty much probably going to find out that's not the case. We also run into Uhura. We find out that this time she is on her security rotation and that she has been under the tutelage of La'an Noonien Singh. She's got a sore shoulder. She's been having a lot of issues. Not complaining about it. You know, this is kind of why she's in Starfleet. She's got to go through her training. Has a nice back and forth with Pike here about what La'an is teaching and her various levels or her different teachings. I think he mentioned something about number 7 being particularly interesting. So nice touch there to see Uhura is getting the full training. Reminds me a bit of how Neelix was doing little rotations on Voyager, except that never seemed to go well, and I like this better. That being said, now we find the crux of what's going to be the problem in this episode. There is a shuttle requesting help, a distress call, requesting that they be saved from this raiding war. It's not really a warship. I guess it could be, but it's not really a match for our Starfleet Enterprise here. And it's got grappling hooks, so it was nice to see those again. Those were a classic from Enterprise. Nice to see them still being used out here in the 2300s or whatever we are. So they need to save the ship. Obviously, they get some fire on them. It's not the end of the world. It only reduces the shields by, I think, 0.02%. So whoever these people are, they're not a match for our valiant heroes. But they make a mistake. That's right. Uhura is given charge of the weapons, and she sets them to the lowest possible output. However, when the ship fires, it shifts course, and she blowies a hole through the ship. Oopsie daisy. Not completely destroyed, but they pretty much mess it up. And then the very next scene, we see that the shuttle that they rescued, they are transporting their survivors on board. Something I did not care for at this point. They accidentally did more damage to the bad guys, for lack of a better term, and didn't care about it. They just let them crash to the planet. They didn't try to tractor them. They didn't try to save them. They didn't try to contact them. They're just like, oopsie daisy, we shot these baddies and they're crashing into the planet. Oh well, let's go ahead and save the 3 people on the shuttle we were trying to save to begin with, and to hell with those people. What matter to us are they? Whatever. Then we discover that there is one woman, a man, and his child, and this is the woman that Pike met 10 years ago when he was rescuing a shuttle in this very area, and they have some sort of history. I do want to give you the synopsis of the episode now because I do believe it is not correct. So they say a threat to an idyllic planet reunites Captain Pike with the lost love of his life. They had a brief history. They had a little fling back in the day, but love of his life, I'm not buying that. I am not buying that. Anyways, the rest of it, to protect her and a scientific holy child from a conspiracy, Pike offers his help and is forced to face unresolved feelings of his past. Based on what we saw, I'm not buying that as a synopsis. It's a little overblown. Moving along, we get a nice treat of Mbenga and his daughter. She's being read a story. She comments that it's the same chapter that he read her last time, so these trips in and out of the transporter are not that great for her. She's kind of losing track of time. She's losing track of how long it's been. Mbenga's having trouble keeping track of what the last thing you read to her is, so it's not a great solution. Keeping her in the transporter buffer might be saving her life, but she's not living much of a life in the meantime. Then we have a plot dump, I guess, is something you could call it, in the conference room to explain that what is happening on this world is basically an ascension of this child. So the child needs to come up to his holy place in the society. He's going to be some sort of instigator for the next great change, kind of sort of like a Dalai Lama situation where when this child is born, he is given this role. He is given this great protector, this great scientific role in the planet that is going to be coronated, I guess is the word, in 2 days. And she believes these people were trying to steal him for ransom, or at least that's what she tells our crew. And she tells them that there's this other planet in the system, which is an abandoned colony from aliens long ago that they've had relatively peaceful relations with. So she has no idea why they're doing this, aside from, they want some money or they want some clout or something along those lines. Then we go back to sickbay, and it turns out that these people are super duper wonderfully advanced. Our technology looks like crap next to theirs. They've got quantum bio implants. Obviously, that gets Mbenga thinking. That'll come back into play later. Then we finally go down and explore the crashed ship that we blew out of the sky and had no care for whatsoever. Didn't try to rescue the people that we just blasted out of the sky, regardless of finding out who was in the right, who was in the wrong to begin with. I digress. And we discover that on this ship there is this interesting technology, which I'll come back to later. And there's also a coin which she brings back up to the ship, and this is something that it's their highest medal of their military. It's something they give to these super elite guards that are supposed to be protecting the boy, the child. I don't think it has to be a boy. The super holy child with their lives. They're the palace guards. They're the super elite. They are given this medal to show their devotion. And the only way that could be on the ship is if one of them defected, and SpaghettiOs. Then we get this beautiful shot of this city. Apparently it's a floating city above the clouds, very reminiscent of the original series Cloudminders. It's also very Columbia-like, if you ever played Bioshock Infinite, that sort of feeling. Looks great. This is the type of thing I actually appreciate them being able to render in computer-generated graphics when they don't go overboard. This is the kind of thing that they can actually enhance, so that's well done on their end. I do like that. We have a great scene here where Spock and the child interact. This child is something I'm not 100% about. So the child is basically this genius, a tech genius. I'm not sure if he was born that way, and that's the reason they need him, his brain, his abilities to become their chosen one, or if he was given these abilities by his quantum bio implants, whatever the heck they are. Which reminds me very much of a Stargate SG-1 episode where the children were given nanites at birth, and those nanites had the, super abilities to basically give them enhanced abilities, and all the information from prior generations allow them to live out a very, very accelerated way of doing science, and then they were extracted and given to the rest of the population. I don't know if it's that sort of situation, or if it's just he was born super advanced and that's what made him into the holy child that he needs to be at this point. Anyways, his interaction with Spock is great. It leads to the comment that he's sort of invented his own subspace transponder or something along those lines that's way, way better than what Starfleet has. Spock is kind of intrigued by this. It will come into play later. And now back on the planet, they're going through the guards trying to find out if one of them was the bad guy who betrayed them. Yes, obviously they were. They have a little fight and didn't really go anywhere. They caught him. He ran away. They caught him. Accidentally got killed by a knife. End of that story. Back on the Enterprise, this isn't really vital to anything. I just wanted to show that George Kirk was back in the episode for a brief minute, and he didn't want to intrude. He didn't want any sort of confrontation, so when La'an came over, he's like, bye. Anyways, La'an is giving Uhura these chips for her to translate because she took them without security clearance, even though she's a security officer, whatever. She's not following Starfleet channels. And she wants Uhura to translate them so she doesn't have to put them through the Enterprise computer because that would take too long. And she wants to solve this ASAP. Cool little side story. Whatever. Then we see Pike doing his best Kirk impression where he is in bed with this lady. Obviously, they met 10 years ago. It's mentioned here that they both had a crush on each other 10 years ago and never took it anywhere. So I guess this is their first time, which leads me to believe how could this be the lost love of his life? Anyways, he brings up his whole traumatic future thing that in 10 years he's going to basically be a walking eggplant in a wheelchair sort of a thing. I said walking. No, he's not even going to be walking. He's going to be confined to a floaty wheelchair with no ability to speak except for beeps. Horrible, horrible future he's hoping to avoid. She says that they're so super advanced that if he were to relinquish whatever and come live among them, being one of them, they could probably cure him. And also, that since they're super duper lovers, it wouldn't be such a bad thing. Pike is like, I'll think about that. So it seems like Pike is kind of collecting worlds to live in after his horrible end of life tragedy in 10 years. He's got this one. He's got Talos. How many more planets with beautiful women that he's bedded is he going to collect as a way to live out his life after his accident in 10 years? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. So then there's this scene where the boy and his father are trying to beam away because they don't, at least he says they don't feel like the Enterprise can keep them safe. So they are beamed out without Kyle's permission. So somebody else beams them out and then immediately they're able to beam the father back and not the boy. They say, oh crap, the Raiders have somehow beamed them off the ship. And then the Raiders, they catch him in a tractor beam. They try to warp away and boom, explosion. They're all freaked out like, oh no, the child has died. Oh no, the child has died. Spock is able to find a signal based on that thing I mentioned earlier where he says, actually, the boy is in the Enterprise. Turns out that the father is in on it. Shock. Oh, nobody saw that coming. The father did not want his son to be ascended or whatever, so he's trying to safely get him away to this other planet, the alien colony. But as we discover from the La'an and the Uhura sub-story, rather, that's not the case. This is actually a split-off colony from this planet that doesn't like the way this planet is doing things, so the father was working with them to try and safely get his son away from the tragedy that is about to befall him by ascension. Here he is back on the planet doing his full ascension thing. Spock. Pike, Gordarmit, Pike is his name, is all on board. He's like, yeah, this is the cool thing. Suddenly there's interference. They can't get a transporter beam. They can't get a signal, so the Enterprise cannot let him know what's about to happen. He's invited into the ascension ceremony because, the woman is very much in love with him. And shock and awe, this here is the previous High Child's body being removed from the machinery that he was plugged into. Kind of looks a little bit like either Dobby or Doctor Who from that, or the Doctor from Doctor Who in that episode where the Master kind of super accelerated his aging and kept him in the little bird cage. Anyways, I digress. So they end up plugging this kid in. Pike is very, very against it, trying to stop it. he's like, no, no, no. He ends up getting like punched in the face and knocked out or something like that. So this boy is super powerful. He's basically plugged in and controlling the whole civilization. That was his role. That is his fate. That is what the father was trying to save him from. Then Pike wakes up in the girl's room and she gives him this nice speech about, can you really say that your Federation is any better, that every single child is beyond suffering, that nobody has to suffer for the people that are better off? This whole the needs of the many thing, where one child has to suffer and we acknowledge that and we worship this child, whereas in normal societies anyone can suffer while the higher ups, just kind of ignore it and look down on it. We don't ignore it. We look at it, we worship them, we give them, the best that we can and acknowledge the fact that they are suffering for the greater good. Pike is basically like, yeah, screw that. Beam me up right now. And then he just pieces out on her. Then the father, who was a super genius doctor, basically comes to Mbenga and says, I'll give you the start of the way that might lead to you curing your daughter. This isn't going to be an instant cure, which thank God I was kind of half expecting it to end with, oh, by the way, here's an instant cure. So this is giving him the first step on the path to curing his daughter. We can hopefully move past that, resolve it eventually. And it wasn't just an insta miracle. So I do like that. I do like the fact that it wasn't just instantly solved, that he's going to hopefully work on it and resolve the situation on his own with this piece of new evidence. So depending on what happens with that, I do actually like this scene. So that technology that I mentioned earlier very, very much looked to me very reminiscent of the technology from Spock's brain. So I say that this episode seemed to me to be sort of like a mix between Spock's brain and the Cloud Minders. So it was this cloud city that was floating over a planet. All of these people were super well off. However, their technology needed to be run by a host. I was going to say a human host, but a host of super brain power, for lack of a better understanding, that needed to be plugged in every so often to run their world, run their technology. And it's very similar to the Cloud Minders in that that was an upper lower class thing. This isn't the same planet, so they're the upper class, but then they've got the lower tech colony, spin-off colony, that is sort of like the lower class. They don't really talk much about the upper and lower class thing here, but it seems like a combination of these two ideas to me, where you've got Spock's brain needing to power a civilization, whereas that was one that was too dumb to remember how to do it. This was a civilization that was super advanced, but still couldn't find a better way than an actual living brain of some sort of genius kid. Okay, this leads me to something I was going to make a video on, and I might still make a video on, that Strange New Worlds thus far, while not bad, is not innovating anything. And I know that was sort of the intention going in, that it's a return to classic Star Trek. So far, though, by returning to classic Star Trek, they are just taking a classic Star Trek and, in essence, remaking it. And I'm not saying that in a horribly negative way, because a lot of Star Trek has consistently recycled their ideas. But it does seem to me that they're going to need to step out of that and take things in their own direction. So if you look at the episodes we've had so far, it's basically this episode plus this episode equals this episode, which, great. A lot of them are good ideas and good stories. But if we're going to truly get a unique identity from Star Trek Strange New Worlds, they do need to start stepping out on their own. And I know things are different. We don't have 26, 23 even episode seasons anymore. We've got 10 episode seasons. So it's going to take a hell of a long time to develop so much of their own canon and their own history. But I do think that's what they eventually need to do if they're going to be remembered as more than just the original series light, which I do think they can do, because a lot of these characters are set up to become their own things. So I do just want to mention that, because a lot of this episode was predictable. A lot of this episode was just two prior Star Trek episodes mashed together And that's fine. It's fun. I'm enjoying it. I did like this episode. I wouldn't say it's fantastic. I wouldn't say it's the greatest Star Trek episode ever, but I liked it for what it was. And I just hope that they can take the pedestal, or not, that's not the word, take the footstone, whatever I'm trying to say, the bedrock of Star Trek, and build upon it to go their own way. And maybe that's what the end of the season into season 2 will be. It'll be like establish. Okay, our own path. And if that's the case, I'm all here for that, because so far I'm liking most of these characters, and they seem to be getting back to the roots in some ways. In some ways, it's not going to be the same. It's never going to be the same, but I do still have high hopes after what I've seen so far. A very, very better episode than last episode, but I think that has to do with how you feel about that humor. This felt more like a classic conundrum from Star Trek, or just science fiction in general. So until next time, computer and program.